Barack Obama comes back strongly in the second presidential debate, but did we finally get policy specifics from either candidate? You're watching a special edition of Inside Story US 2012 from Hempstead in New York. Hello, I'm Shihab Rattansi and welcome to Hofstra University, where that debate has just ended. It was seen as a crucial moment for Barack Obama after his performance in the first presidential debate allowed Mitt Romney to close the gap in the polls. Despite the relative unpredictability of the town hall format, there was a reminder of the control over the US political system, the careful control of the US political system, when the Green Party presidential campaign was arrested for protesting against the two-party dominance here at the debate.
Well, we're here to stand our ground. We're here to stand ground for the American people who have been systematically locked out of these debates for decades by the Commission on Presidential Debates. We think that this commission is entirely illegitimate and that the American people actually deserve to hear choices which are not bought and paid for by multinational corporations and Wall Street. This is why we are not hearing the critical issues in this debate.
And with me to discuss the significance of what was actually said at the debate, John Nichols, the Washington correspondent for The Nation magazine. John, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
It's interesting, actually. The debate did start with a discussion about energy.
Yeah.
I think many people might have preferred a Green Party candidate to be part of this debate, but here's some of what was said on the issue of energy.
We've opened up public lands. We're actually drilling more on public lands than in the previous administration. And the previous president was an oil man. And natural gas isn't just appearing magically, we're encouraging it and working with the industry. And when I hear Governor Romney say he's a big coal guy, I mean, keep in mind, when you were governor of Massachusetts, you stood in front of a coal plant and pointed at it and said, this plant kills, and took great pride in shutting it down. And now suddenly you're a big champion of coal. So what I've tried to do is be consistent. With respect to something like coal, we made the largest investment in clean coal technology to make sure that even as we're producing more coal, we're producing it cleaner and smarter. Same thing with oil, same thing with natural gas. And the proof is our oil imports are down to the lowest levels in 20 years. Oil production is up, natural gas production is up, and most importantly, we're also starting to build cars that are more efficient. And that's creating jobs. That means those cars can be exported because that's the demand around the world. And it also means that it'll save money in your pocketbook. That's the strategy you need on all of the above strategy, and that's what we're going to do in the next 4 years.
But that's not what you've done in the last 4 years. That's the problem.
Sure.
In the last 4 years, you cut permits and licenses on federal land and federal waters in half.
Not true, Governor Romney.
So how much did you cut them by?
Not true.
By how much did you cut them by then?
Governor, we have actually produced more oil.
No. How much did you cut licenses and permits on federal land and federal waters?
Governor Romney, here's what we did. There were a whole bunch of oil companies.
No, I had a question, and the question was, how much did you cut them by?
You want me to answer
How much did you cut them by?
I'm happy to answer the question.
All right, and it is?
Here's what happened. You had a whole bunch of oil companies who had leases on public lands that they weren't using. So what we said was, you can't just sit on this for 10, 20, 30 years, decide when you want to drill, when you want to produce, when it's most profitable for you. These are public lands. So if you want to drill on public lands, you use it or you lose it.
Okay, now
and so what we did was take away those leases, and we are now reletting them so that we can actually make a profit.
And production on government lands is down.
No, it isn't.
Production on government land of oil is down 14%. And production on gas is down 9%.
It's just not true.
It's absolutely true. Look, there's no question but that the people recognize that we have not produced more oil and gas on federal lands.
Well, John, we've talked a lot about the narrowing of the political discourse in this country. So when it's energy, it's simply about who can drill more, who can drill more. I mean, that must be rather depressing for a lot of Obama's base.
I think it is. It looks like Sarah Palin won. And the interesting thing about that discourse, it was the most intense of the debate. They actually moved to within a few feet of one another. I think they both realized that they had gone kind of too far in and started to back off a little. But one of the reasons for that intensity is that while that issue may seem a little bit esoteric, an odd place to begin, it's very real in a number of the battleground states. Ohio is the biggest battleground state of this year. Southern Ohio is a coal-producing region, and it isn't all quote-unquote clean coal. And so as a result, they both really wanted to claim their turf here. Also, it's odd that energy policy in America has become linked not just to jobs and not just to gasoline prices, but also to war and peace. And so they try to bring an awfully lot into that discourse.
So now we have this concept of North American energy independence from Mitt Romney. I mean, what does that mean? And does he not understand that oil is a global market?
Actually, Mitt Romney's not a dumb man. He understands completely, but he's using that false construct to speak to Americans who he thinks he can fool into believing that if he's elected president, he can control gas prices and things of that nature. It's an old political gambit, I have to be honest with you. He's not the first politician to do it.
The climate change,
gone
neither party.
From this debate.
President Obama.
And that's why you needed a green candidate here. That's really why.
All right, well, let's move on then to the economy. One thing that Mitt Romney has often said is, while not giving specifics, trust me, I've done this before, I'm a businessman. So here's some of that exchange.
I was someone who ran businesses for 25 years and balanced the budget. I ran the Olympics and balanced the budget. I ran the state of Massachusetts as a governor, to the extent any governor does, and balanced the budget all 4 years. When we're talking about math that doesn't add up, how about $4 trillion of deficits over the last 4 years? $5 trillion. That's math that doesn't add up. We have a president talking about someone's plan in a way that's completely foreign to what my real plan is. And then we have his own record, which is we have 4 consecutive years where he said when he was running for office he would cut the deficit in half. Instead, he's doubled it. We've gone from $10 trillion of national debt to $16 trillion of national debt. If the president were reelected, we go to almost $20 trillion of national debt. This puts us on a road to Greece. I know what it takes to balance budgets. I've done it my entire life. So for instance, when he says, yours is a $5 trillion cut, well, no, it's not, because I'm offsetting some of the reductions with holding down some of the deductions. And
Governor, I need to have you both hang up. I understand the stakes here. I understand both of you, but I will get run out of town if I don't allow
you, Mr. President, I just described to you precisely how I do it, with a single number that people can put, and they can put their deductions and credits into that bucket.
Actually, that was more of an exchange between Candy Crowley, the moderator, and Mitt Romney. Again, very assertive moderator for a change, actually, which was good. That first point then, Mitt Romney balanced budgets of the Olympic Games. That was a federal bailout, though, wasn't it?
Well, it's not only a federal bailout. As Salt Lake City Magazine has revealed in a very good investigation of this, the Olympics were actually stabilized before Romney arrived. He came in to manage something that was working. And he has made extravagant claims about what all he did to fix it. The fact is, the fix was there before. Similarly, in an awfully lot of the things that he talks about, he constructs an alternative reality that has him as the savior of every situation he stepped into. I think it is fair to say that Mitt Romney has a reputation as a good manager. He is somebody who can come in and...
To make profits for shareholders.
Well, and even maybe to make a pretty Olympics that come off well. Give him that. But understand that to be a good manager is a very, very different thing than to take on a huge problem and fix it. He is suggesting that some of his managerial experience in situations where he was set up to succeed somehow qualifies him to fix big problems. I'm not sure that comes across.
But he's right, though, when he says that President Obama has emphasized the deficit quite a bit. And there is this sense that both President Obama, again, that narrowing of the discourse, when it comes to the economy, they really do talk a great deal about the deficit when that might not be the major issue right now. It's jobs and stimulus and getting the economy working.
Well, and
President Obama's taken on that framework.
The president is very cautious about pushing back and saying the way you fix a deficit is by getting a lot of people to work, and a stimulus program, jobs programs might actually do that. Instead, he sort of buys into the argument, I think because, frankly, an awfully lot of American media has gone to that shorthand. The Democrat Party
does buy into it. It's not a terribly radical party anymore.
Well,
they're both center-right parties.
There are Democrats in the field running and winning races, like Bernie Sanders in Vermont, Sherrod Brown in Ohio, saying the big issue is jobs, not the deficit.
Well, we'll go back to jobs in a bit, although actually this is quite interesting. The issue of women's reproductive rights came up. But what was so fascinating was how it was framed for once, and this is great, actually. Let's take a look at this.
We're going to have employers in the new economy, in the economy I'm going to bring to play, that are going to be so anxious to get good workers, they're going to be anxious to hire women. In the last 4 years, women have lost 580,000 jobs. That's the net of what's happened in the last 4 years. We're still down 580,000 jobs. I mentioned 3.5 million women more now in poverty than 4 years ago. What we can do to help young women and women of all ages is to have a strong economy, so strong that employers are looking to find good employees and bringing them into their workforce and adapting to a flexible work schedule that gives women the opportunities that they would otherwise not be able to afford. This is what I've done. It's what I look forward to doing, and I know what it takes to make an economy work.
I just want to point out that when Governor Romney's campaign was asked about the Lilly Ledbetter bill, whether he supported it, he said, "I'll get back to you." And that's not the kind of advocacy that women need in any economy. Now, there's some other issues that have a bearing on how women succeed in the workplace. For example, their health care. Now, a major difference in this campaign is that Governor Romney feels comfortable having politicians in Washington decide the health care choices that women are making. I think that's a mistake. In my health care bill, I said insurance companies need to provide contraceptive coverage to everybody who's insured, because this is not just a health issue, it's an economic issue for women. It makes a difference. This is money out of that family's pocket. Governor Romney not only opposed it, he suggested that, in fact, employers should be able to make the decision as to whether or not a woman gets contraception through her insurance coverage. That's not the kind of advocacy that women need. When Governor Romney says that we should eliminate funding for Planned Parenthood, there are millions of women all across the country who rely on Planned Parenthood for not just contraceptive care, they rely on it for mammograms, for cervical cancer screenings. That's a pocketbook issue for women and families all across the country. And it makes a difference in terms of how well and effectively women are able to work.
Now that was interesting. Women's health is a pocketbook issue.
That was actually Obama in what I think you could probably say was his most genius move. And when you say genius move, American term for, really getting it right, what he was doing was two things there. He's trying to appeal to women, and particularly among young women, the issue is not that they like him or dislike him. They're gonna, if they come to the polls, they'll vote for him. But he needs to get them charged up and energized on the access to reproductive rights. He was also talking to somewhat older women and to working class women who really probably are more concerned about the economic issues, but there he's making that connection. He's bringing the economics in. That's very smart politics, again, for the swing states, where Barack Obama will do very well among young women, he'll do very well among young people, but he desperately needs to get into those working class households. He needs to make a connection.
And he's right, of course. I mean, beyond the politics stage.
Well, no, I mean, issue, right? But it's a painful reality that in politics being right doesn't always make you president. Yes, but this is very smart. It's very, very smart politics. And I think also something else there. A few years ago in a presidential debate, if the issue of abortion rights, reproductive rights came up, the Democratic candidate would run from it. They didn't really want to go there because they were still trying to keep that soft. American politics has changed. For the Democrats, reproductive rights is a base issue. It is as essential to them, for instance, as deficit reduction is for Mitt Romney. You've got to talk about it, and you've got to go there in smart ways. I think on this one, the president did very well tonight.
But there was that startling poll, I think at the beginning of today, from the USA Today, suggesting Romney had made up some ground with women voters in swing states. It was a USA Today poll, usual arguments about methodology and so forth. I mean, but how did he do that?
Give him that. I mean, let's accept the reality that our swing voters probably are working class women, because a lot of working class men aren't going to vote for Obama. It's polling shows that men tend toward Romney. So working class women in swing states. And when Romney did well and talking on his tax cuts and some of his economics in the first debate, I think that loosened up that block. What Obama was trying to do tonight was to talk directly to them, to a woman in Toledo, Ohio, and say, hey, you should hear me on this issue. It's important, and I'm going to make connections to things you care about. That's what he had to do tonight. And again, I think that it was perhaps, from a political standpoint, his most effective moment in the debate.
Mainly domestic issues discussed at this debate, though there is this issue of Benghazi, the attack on the American consulate in Benghazi in Libya, questions about who knew what and when. The Republicans think they've got something, so this is how that exchange went.
The day after the attack, Governor, I stood in the Rose Garden and I told the American people and the world that we were going to find out exactly what happened, that this was an act of terror, and I also said that we're going to hunt down those who committed this crime. And then a few days later, I was there greeting the caskets coming into Andrews Air Force Base and grieving with the families. And the suggestion that anybody in my team, whether the Secretary of State, our UN ambassador, anybody on my team would play politics or mislead when we've lost 4 of our own, Governor, is offensive. That's not what we do. That's not what I do as president. That's not what I do as commander-in-chief.
Governor, if you want to reply quickly to this, please.
I certainly do. I think it's interesting the president just said something which is that on the day after the attack, he went to the Rose Garden and said that this was an act of terror.
That's what I said.
You said in the Rose Garden, the day after the attack, it was an act of terror. It was not a spontaneous demonstration. Is that what you're saying?
Please proceed, Governor.
I want to make sure we get that for the record, because it took the president 14 days before he called the attack in Benghazi an act of terror.
Get the transcript.
He did, in fact, sir. So let me call it an act of terror.
Can you say that a little louder, Candy?
He did call it an act of terror. It did as well take 2 weeks or so for the whole idea of there being a riot out there about this tape.
Interesting, there another robust exchange with the moderator from CNN, who I guess the Republicans aren't too happy with tonight.
They're furious. In fact, I was speaking to John Sununu, the former White House chief of staff in the old Bush administration, and he actually referred to Candy Crowley as aiding and abetting Barack Obama. But I think that's a very unfair hit. Right. I mean, here was a situation where you had a clear clash, and all she did was say, look, you know, what he's saying is true here.
But there's this judgment, though, in the American media that to fact check and say something is true or not true is thought not to be impartial somehow, which we often find.
Well, yeah, the facts are somehow. But I will say the one subtlety of that is that there's always a question of do you fact check for all?
Right.
But yeah, that's where people get angry.
Here. And on that topic, then, Benghazi, actually, it's still very murky. But I mean, how big an issue do you think that is? And we know that Romney's campaign said they were looking for a 1979 Carter Iranian hostage kind of issue.
Yeah.
I mean, is this really it?
No, it's not. It's not a kitchen table issue. It's not one that when I go to the battleground states and talk to voters that they bring up. If I bring it up, they may have an opinion. And frankly, their opinion isn't necessarily that high of how the president and his people handled it. There is criticism out there. We should be very conscious of that. But again, it's not front and center. There is an acceptance, I think, on the part of Americans that in some countries around the world where we are involved as a republic, that bad things are going to happen.
This idea that Al-Qaeda is regrouping and counterattacking and so forth, which is the narrative that the Republicans are trying to present here, is that catching any imagination?
I don't think so. And one of the reasons it isn't is because of something rather honorable on Mitt Romney's part, that he doesn't ever really want to go all in on it. He doesn't quite hit as hard as some of the right-wing talk radio does. And so as a result, I think that if Romney is going to go into this, if you're going to fight this fight, you really have to hit hard.
Well, he has no alternatives. I mean, again, the foreign policies are very similar.
They are, and so that's, I think that Mitt Romney, he wants to get the best out of it, but he's not really hitting the president in a way that would resonate with folks who are frankly more interested in jobs and more concerned about, how the economy's going than what's happening in Libya.
Well, let's return to jobs then. Another moment where President Obama's base might have been a bit concerned. I mean, it's one thing to talk a lot about, the deficit and grand bargains, perhaps, but they are wondering what he will be like in a second term. Another, perhaps a revealing moment from President Obama about job creation.
I think a lot of this campaign, maybe over the last 4 years, has been devoted to this notion that I think government creates jobs, that somehow is the answer. That's not what I believe. I believe that the free enterprise system is the greatest engine of prosperity the world's ever known. I believe in self-reliance and individual initiative and risk takers being rewarded. But I also believe that everybody should have a fair shot. And everybody should do their fair share. And everybody should play by the same rules.
I don't know, was the balance off there, do you think? I mean, did he have to push so hard into this idea that, not challenging the idea that government is a good thing, even, government stimulus right now at a local level for teachers and firefighters, which he's also talked about before, that's not a bad thing necessarily.
No, it's actually very good. In fact, it's the stimulus that has saved many of our cities and states. But this is the subtlety of a debate at this point in a campaign. He isn't trying to reach his base.
Right.
He is trying to reach swing voters in states like Ohio and Wisconsin and Iowa. And they tend to be people that are a little concerned about government spending, things of that. Now, the odd thing about it is how much our politics in America has changed. If this was 1968 and Hubert Humphrey was debating Richard Nixon, what Obama said would have been Nixon's line. And Humphrey would have been up there saying, as he did, and frankly, Lyndon Johnson, that it is the job of government to step in. If the private sector doesn't create jobs, then government must do it because we can't have people in want, people in need. The Democratic Party has, in the last 20 years, moved much more toward the center and even on the right on these issues, and you heard that from Obama.
This being the 21st century, then when we talk about jobs, then outsourcing is a major issue, and there was a very interesting exchange on that topic.
The place where we've seen manufacturing go has been China. China is now the largest manufacturer in the world. It used to be the United States of America. A lot of good people have lost jobs. 500,000 manufacturing jobs have been lost in the last 4 years. That's total over the last 4 years. One of the reasons for that is that people think it's more attractive in some cases to go offshore than to stay here. We have made it less attractive for enterprises to stay here than to go offshore from time to time. What I will do as president is make sure it's more attractive to come to America again.
Now, Governor Romney talked about China, as I already indicated. In the private sector, Governor Romney's company invested in what were called pioneers of outsourcing. That's not my phrase. That's what reporters called it. And as far as currency manipulation, the currency's actually gone up 11% since I've been president because we have pushed them hard. And we've put unprecedented trade pressure on China. That's why exports have significantly increased under my presidency.
This is interesting because there is currently a bit of a scandal about Bain Capital, Romney's former firm, and Sensata. Perhaps you can quickly explain that.
Very quickly, there's a town called Freeport, Illinois, a real working class town. They've got a high-tech plant that makes auto sensors for cars. Company's called Sensata. Bain Capital bought it a couple of years ago. They're shutting the plant down, moving high-end jobs to China, to a state where they have a contract to help to industrialize this Chinese state. And they will close the plant the day before the election.
But this also then talks, often both Democrats and Republicans talk about structural unemployment, and this kind of puts an end to perhaps that idea that it's high-tech jobs. If only the educational levels and the training of Americans would be a bit better, then they wouldn't lose jobs to China. These are those sort of jobs.
These are good jobs. They're doing the technical stuff. Right. And so then you ask the question, well, what are people going to do? And I think that gets to the heart of the debate. This debate didn't quite go there, though. You were really more in the zone of what we refer to in America as zingers. And it is absolutely clear that on what is for an awful lot of Americans a fundamental issue, outsourcing, Obama had the zinger. In this exchange and another one, he basically said, Mitt Romney, you're not the guy who's going to fight China.
Having said that, though, Barack Obama hired as one of his main economic advisors the head of GE, which is the biggest outsourcer in the U.S.
Absolutely. It's one of the nightmares of our American politics. At the grassroots in states across this country, you have Democratic candidates who are saying we need fair trade, not free trade. But at the highest level of the party, both with Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, you get a much more centrist stance.
John Nichols from The Nation, thank you very much as ever. And that's it from the team in Hofstra University. We'll continue, though, monitoring the comments carefully at the next debates amongst the two presidential candidates here in the United States. But that's it for now.